right, folks. Hello and welcome to week 6. Okay, we're talking today about understanding analytical writing. I do apologize for the slide saying week 5. This is mainly because it used to be when I did this in person that this was week 5. That I wound up having to do 2 sets of slides in a single week. But since we're doing online and we're only doing 1 slideshow a week, we're kind of spreading it out a little bit more. So this week is going to be week 5. This is going to be understanding analytical writing. Let's just hop right into it. All right, so why analytical writing? So analysis comes from a writer's need to understand. By writing an analytical essay, you're attempting to share your journey of discovery with an audience. And a well-written analytical essay will communicate clearly to the reader the exact information they need to understand along with the author. Okay? So, in a sense, when you're doing an analytical essay, what you're trying to do is get your audience to understand the topic the same way that you do. Okay? So, let's take a look at some examples here on pages 126 to 127. These are instances where students have written analytical papers. Okay? Hypothetical students, of course. So these examples are ones that Yagelski provides. So first one, group of students in an environmental policy class analyze costs for transporting food to encourage their campus to buy locally and go green. Okay, here's the particulars. After learning in an environmental policy class about the potentially harmful environmental and health impacts of large-scale agriculture, a few students at a college near a large city become concerned about the campus policy to purchase foods from large distributors that transport produce hundreds of miles. When the students approached the food service coordinator about the possibility of buying produce from farms located just outside the city, they were told that such a policy would be too expensive and difficult to implement. The students understood these objections, but they were not convinced that buying food from local farms was not feasible. So they decided to investigate. If such a policy did not save money, would it nevertheless help make the campus greener? Would it help the local economy? Would local food be healthier or taste better? Would students be unhappy with changes to the dining hall menus? The students discussed these questions with their instructor and did some research. They also talked to other students about the issue. Their investigation eventually led them to write a letter to their college president proposing a new policy to purchase more locally produced foods for the campus dining hall. Their letter included an analysis of the advantages and disadvantages of such a policy, including a breakdown of potential costs and a discussion of how other students on the campus felt about such a policy. All right, so you see what they're doing there is breaking the subject down into smaller pieces so that the audience can understand a little clearer what the deal is and what kind of arguments being made. Okay? Let's look at the second example here. Second example is Jim investigated the costs of 4-year college versus 2-year college, including advantages and disadvantages of both, and wrote an essay about his findings. So let's take a look. Jim, a student at a large state university, began following a discussion on Facebook about the value of college after a classmate informed his Facebook friends that he was leaving college because he could no longer afford it. Jim's classmate did not think borrowing more money to pay for his final few semesters was a good idea. His comment provoked a debate about whether a college degree is worth the cost. Some students wondered whether their degrees would lead to good-paying jobs, which prompted other students to argue that the purpose of college isn't just to prepare students for careers, but to educate them as citizens as well. A few students posted links to articles about the rising costs of college tuition, as well as average salaries of college graduates compared with those of workers without degrees. Jim followed the discussion closely because of his own concerns about paying for college. To save money, Jim enrolled in a less expensive community college for 2 years before transferring to a 4-year university. After he posted a message about his decision, someone asked whether Jim received the same quality of education at the community college as he would have had he enrolled for all 4 years at the university. Jim wasn't sure. As he followed the discussion, he also read the articles that others had posted, found more information about the advantages and disadvantages of 2-year college degrees, and posted links to relevant articles on his social media accounts. Eventually, his investigation helped him understand some benefits and costs attending a 2-year college, which he shared on his Facebook page. One of his friends suggested that Jim write an essay about the issue for his old high school newspaper, which Jim did using his Facebook post as his starting point. All right, so once again, we're breaking down the topic into something that's a little bit more palatable for the average reader, and something that's going to be related to the average reader that kids going to college are going to want to know whether it's worth it to go to 2-year college before the 4-year college, or just go straight to the 4-year. Okay? And we have the third circumstance. Amber pondered whether the U.S. efforts to rebuild Afghanistan were causing more harm than good, and wrote a blog posting discussing what she learned on the ground while serving there in the Army. So here's that situation. Amber, a part-time college student who serves in the National Guard, took a leave of absence from classes because her unit was deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months. Part of the unit's mission was to build roads and an irrigation system for farmers in a remote region of Afghanistan. Amber was excited about this mission, which she believed would improve the lives of Afghans and relations between Afghans and Americans. However, during her months there, Amber began to realize that the situation was more complicated than she first believed. Many residents feared reprisals from insurgents if they accepted American help. Others worried that new roads would mean more military vehicle traffic. Also, the new irrigation system didn't reach some of the smaller farmers. Cultural and religious differences between Afghans and Americans exacerbated misunderstandings about these projects. All these problems caused Amber to wonder whether the Americans' humanitarian efforts created more problems than they solved. Amber talked to other soldiers about these concerns. She read articles and online discussions to learn more about the complexities of humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. When she returned to the United States, she continued writing a blog that she began in Afghanistan, focusing on her own analysis of the difficulties faced by American units engaged in humanitarian efforts. Her blog attracted many readers, some who shared their concerns and others who challenged her conclusions. Okay? So, this is an example of somebody doing it for online purposes. They're writing a personal blog about their personal experience and analyzing their personal experience in the same vein as the bigger picture surrounding their circumstances. Okay? All three of these situations involve the need to understand an important topic and the desire to communicate what's been learned. Okay, that's the main point of an analysis, is to say what you've learned about the subject matter from how you've analyzed it. All right. So let's talk about analytical writing and how to understand it. Analytical writing is the most common form of college writing. Okay? Most times when you are writing essays for other professors, they are going to ask you for analysis. A typical research paper is usually an analytical essay, examining an issue or problem, finding appropriate sources, analyzing the issue in an appropriate manner for the course. Okay? So many times your analytical writing is going to be what you imagine for a term paper or any kind of essay for any research-based class. Okay? Effective analytical writing involves three things: a desire to understand, a careful examination of the evidence, and well-reasoned conclusions. Okay? So, Yagelski presents the steps of analytical writing through the story of writing a hypothetical psychology essay. Okay? Okay, so we have 3 excerpts in the textbook. Okay, and these are examples of the 3 analytical writing stages. So we're going to take a look at each one of these examples and what that means in terms of desire to understand, careful examination, and well-reasoned conclusions. All right, so the essay here, essay excerpt, is from an article titled "The Perils of Being Perfect" by Mark C. Taylor. Okay, we're going to read this essay excerpt and take a look at the desire to understand from this. Okay, several years ago, I was teaching a course on the philosophical assumptions and cultural impact of massive multi-user online games at Williams College. The students in the course were very intelligent and obviously interested in the topic. But as the semester progressed, I began to detect a problem with the class. The students were working hard and performing well, but there was no energy in our discussions and no passion in the students. They were hesitant to express their ideas and often seemed to be going through the motions. I tried to encourage them to be more venturesome with tactics I had used successfully in the past, but nothing worked. One day I asked them what was, or perhaps better, was not going on. While they were so cautious, where was their enthusiasm for learning? They seemed relieved to talk about it, and their response surprised me. Since pre-kindergarten, they explained they had been programmed to perform well so they could get to the next level. They had been taught the downside of risk and encouraged to play it safe. What mattered most was getting into a good elementary school, middle school, and high school so they would finally be admitted to a top college. Having succeeded beyond their parents' wildest expectations, they did not know why they were in college and had no idea what to do after graduation. In today's market-driven economy, we constantly hear that choice is the highest good and that competition fuels innovation. But this is not always true. Choice provokes anxiety, and competition can quell the imagination and discourage the spirit of experimentation that is necessary for creativity. In a world obsessed with ratings, well-meaning parents all too often train their children to jump through the hoops they think will lead to success. Okay? So, the first element of any analytical work is a desire to understand why something exists the way it does. And here's a perfect example of that. Mark Taylor is looking at his students and saying, why do you guys have no energy? Why do you guys seem to just want to get through this? You seem to know the information, but you just have no passion for it. And the students' responses are the start of his internal analysis. His students responding that, oh yeah, we don't know what we want to do. We don't know what the next stage is. We've just always been said, do better so you can get the next grade. Do better so you can get to college. Well, now we're in college. We're kind of getting hung out to dry. Okay? So, now, we all have these moments of wondering, okay? Driven by desire to understand something that interests, puzzles, or concerns us, okay? So there's some informal analysis that you can do at the start of an analysis essay. You can always talk with friends. Talk with the people who the subject affects. Talk with the people that maybe are the most impacted by it, okay? Read the news. What are some news reports saying about your topic? If it's something that's in the news, if it's something that's in current events, it's probably a good idea to try to check out what's being said about it. You might also try to do some light online research. See what you can find in message boards, social media. Maybe do a little bit of delving into databases if you feel up for it, or maybe just some news sources. Okay? So, in academic writing, analysis is shaped by the academic subject being studied. Okay? So, whatever you're studying, whatever class you're doing the analysis for, that's going to influence what kind of approach you take to that analysis and what kind of filter you're going to use for figuring out the answers for yourself. Next part of this, careful examination of the evidence. Okay? We're going to be looking at another text example here. This is from an article titled Opportunity in Higher Education by Michael McPherson and Morton Owen Shapiro. Okay, we're going to take a look at this. This analysis of studying enrollment rates based on income versus math test scores. Okay, so this is going to be an example of presenting evidence. Okay? All right, so there are certainly significant financing constraints that contribute to differential higher education access. Both there are equally important differences in pre-college preparation. Table 5 looks at college enrollment by family income and mathematics test scores. It shows that students scoring in the top third in math are quite likely to go on to college, especially if they come from families above the 25th percentile in income. Even for students in the lowest quartile, the enrollment rate is 82%. However, as test score performance declines, enrollment rates plummet. The decrease is especially large for students from lower income backgrounds. For example, the 82% rate for those with the highest test scores mentioned above falls to 48% when math test scores are in the lowest third. Income clearly plays a role here, but scholastic performance also contributes to explaining college entry. Okay? One thing that these two authors present as part of their evidence is a table of their statistics. Okay, this table is titled "Post-Secondary Enrollment Rates of 1992 High School Graduates by Family Income and Math Test Scores." Okay, so this is how they're coming up with their conclusion that they're making. Okay, based on this evidence that they're analyzing. So it's showing both the math test scores. Math test scores are going to correspond to the rows. Okay, so the first row of the table is lowest third, followed by middle third, followed by top third. Okay, going down each column, the columns represent the income brackets. Okay, that's divided into fours: lowest income, second quartile, third quartile, and highest income. Well, you can assume that second quartile is going to be middle class, third quartile is going to be upper middle class. Okay, so if you take a look at these numbers for lowest third of math test scores, and this is percentage of students who enrolled in college. Okay, lowest income students 48%, second quartile students 50%, third quartile students 64%, highest income students 73%. Okay, then we get to the middle third. Okay, lowest income students 67%, second quartile 75%, third quartile 83%, highest income 89%. Then you have the third row, the top third of math test scores. Lowest income students enrolled in college 82%, second quartile 90%, third quartile 95%, highest income 96%. Okay, which is because of that jump in numbers between the middle third and the top third in the math scores. That's what leads them to reason that scores as much as income leads to whether students attend college or not. Okay, so what the lesson here is when the evidence creates questions and the desire to understand, that evidence can usually be analyzed through careful examination to find your answer. And that's exactly what these two authors do. Okay? Now the third element here is well-reasoned conclusions. Okay? We have another writing example on page 132. This essay is about education researchers looking at government education policies. Okay? So, in this case, we have a trigger for analysis that was a thoroughly researched conclusion that another researcher reached. Okay? And what they're trying to do is trying to replicate their results or find the reason why they came to that conclusion. Okay? One thing to keep in mind is that academic writers rarely give simple solutions to analyses. So typically they're conclusions supported by the available data, and occasionally they raise new questions. Okay, so this is from a book titled "Democracy at Risk: The Need for a New Federal Policy in Education." This was a publication put out by the Forum for Education and Democracy in 2008. Okay, so here is what they have to say. Of nations participating in PISA, or the Program for International Student Assessment, the U.S. is among those where two students of different socioeconomic backgrounds have the largest difference in expected scores. On this measure of equity, the U.S. ranked 45th out of 55 total countries, right above Brazil and Mexico. On the PISA assessments for reading, math, and science, for example, the distance between the average score for Asian and white students on the one hand and Hispanic and Latino students on the other is equal to the distance between the United States average and that of the highest scoring countries. In all these content areas, U.S. students from all groups do least well on the measures of problem solving. These data suggest first that the United States' poor standing is substantially a product of unequal access to the kind of intellectually challenging learning measured on these international assessments. In addition, U.S. students in general, and historically underserved groups in particular, are not getting sufficient access to the problem solving and critical thinking skills needed to apply this knowledge in a meaningful way. The reason for these disparities is not a mystery. The United States not only has the highest poverty rates for children among advanced nations with the fewest social supports, it also provides fewer resources for them at school. America is still at risk in large measure because we have failed to ensure access to education and basic family supports for all of our children. Okay, so that is a heck of a conclusion to reach. Okay, and it's not even offering a solution to this problem. It's basically saying our job is to identify the problem. Solving this problem is above our pay grade. Okay, so these are kind of examples of the basis for analysis, the reasons why you would do an analysis. Okay. Now let's look at the act of actually performing an analysis. Analysis essays typically involve 3 intellectual tasks which come together to create the process. Okay. First task is usually to use a framework to analyze the subject. Okay. How are you going to break it down? What kind of categories are you going to use? You need to make reasonable claims on the basis of available information. Okay. And then finally, supporting claims. Okay. What's the support that you're going to use to back up those reasonable claims that are coming from your analysis? They're typically all composed in the idea generation stage of the writing process and refined as you continue through drafting and revision. Okay? So let's look at each one of these elements, starting with using a framework. Okay? So analysis requires some sort of framework to explain or understand a problem, trend, event, or idea. Okay? This is basically your lens that you're going to use for the analysis. Now, framework could be a theory, it could be a principle, it could be a set of criteria, it could be any number of things. What kind of viewpoint are you using to create this analysis? Okay? To give you a couple of examples here, I'll give you the one example I'm thinking of. You may recall when I first gave you this assignment, I mentioned that I had done a scholarship essay to try to win a scholarship from the Ayn Rand Institute. Okay? Now, as part of the requirements for that essay, I had to have a framework for the analysis of my chosen work, which was the Fountainhead. Okay? They actually gave me that framework, and that was to basically run it through an analysis based on Rand's philosophies. The whole whatever her selfishness is good philosophy is. Okay, objectivism. That's what's called. Subjectivism. Okay, so I had to work through that framework in order to achieve what I wanted to do with that essay, and analyze the work in the sense that it presented an objectivist viewpoint. Okay, so you want to try to. There's all sorts of different examples of this, especially if you get into things like literary analysis. Okay, which is something that I'm intimately familiar with. Mainly because I had to do a lot of it for both my writing degree and for my English degree. Okay, and a lot of this requires looking at works of literature through different lenses. Okay, and that creates your analysis framework. Okay, there are many forms of theory and analysis that are used for doing this sort of work. Okay. Especially when you get to literary analysis, almost all of it involves running it through one philosopher or another, okay, or through one particular class of individuals who may have either created the work or be consumers of the work. Okay, to give you a couple of the more controversial examples that I know are used in colleges, one of them is Marxist analysis, where you run literary works through the philosophies of Karl Marx. Okay, More than just Communist Manifesto, you're also looking at his other philosophical works as well, trying to get an overall unified field theory, so to speak, of what Marx had to say, and then running the literature through that. Okay. Another example that's more about the consumer or producer is queer theory, where you're looking at it through the lens of the LGBTQIA plus community. Okay. That can be interesting sometimes. I do recall actually having to do that for one project in particular when I was an undergrad, and I did an analysis of really one of the better novels I've had to read in college. It was a novel called Middlesex, which had an intersex narrator, basically making a memoir. Okay, this individual is a pseudo-hermaphrodite, and they are assumed to be a girl at birth. But later on, it's discovered when they become, I think, when they hit 14 or 15. This particular narrator, the narrator's name, by the way, is Cal, which is short for their original name. They were originally named Calliope. Okay, because they're Greek. But then eventually, when they discover that they're intersex, they start living as a man, and they change their name to Cal. Okay, about the age of 15, changes in everything entirely, and Cal starts living as a man. Okay, the whole thing is really about family drama for the most part, that's filtered through the eyes of this one single intersex person. Who's trying to figure out their identity. Okay, if you ever get the chance to, this is an excellent book to check out. It's titled Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. Okay. All right. So, using a framework focuses attention on the specifics of the topic. Okay. It allows you to focus on what you want to analyze without having a lot of signal noise get in your way. Okay, so if you have that framework, you have that focus, then you know specifically what you're looking for as you're going through the analysis, and then it's going to help you ultimately because it'll help you focus. Okay. Another thing to do: apply frameworks appropriately. So that's say you use all the elements of the framework and apply them to the topic. Okay. Theory should be used as a lens to help the reader understand the topic analysis. Okay, and then elements that create different perspectives on the subject also help with this. Let's take a look here. In the textbook, we actually have an example of the frameworks that can be used. Okay, in this case, we have starting with an academic subject. Okay, so in this case, we have three different subjects. We have psychology, we have economics, we have theater arts. Okay. The framework that's being used within those academic subjects is what's going to influence the type of analysis that's being done. So in this case, for psychology, the framework is a theory of behaviorism, okay, which is something that I really am not qualified to describe, okay, but it's a prominent psychological theory, and it's how a student can use as a focal point, as a framework for an analysis of like a case study or just in general behavior. Okay. For economics, it has the principle of supply and demand, which is one of the most basic economic principles. Okay, that they're using that as the framework. Okay. Theater arts, technical cinematographic criteria. Okay. So in this case, what we're talking about here is the technical elements that go into framing movie shots. Okay, how they are framed in a way that's artistic and aesthetically pleasing, or serves a story effect, or serves some other artistic effect that the director wants. Okay. Then the next one in the flowchart is the subject of analysis. Okay. For the psychology essay, the subject of analysis is actions of children in school lunchroom. Okay, so you're using the theory of behaviorism to try to analyze why kids act the way they do, like little hooligans when they're at lunch. Okay. For economics, again, the framework is principle of supply and demand. The subject of analysis becomes the prices of iPhones, which always seem extremely high, and that's coming from somebody who actually has one. Okay, so then theater arts. Again, the framework is technical cinematographic criteria. The subject of analysis in this case is chase scenes in action films. Okay, seems like something that'd be fairly lowbrow, but if you're going to be looking at the technical aspects of this, it's probably going to be something that's really going to be interesting depending on who the audience is. Okay, if your audience is guys in film school, they're going to want to know this. Okay. And then the last part of this flowchart is the results of those conclusions. Okay. For the psychology essay, the results of the conclusions is an explanation for the children's actions. So why do they do what they do when they're acting like hooligans at lunch? Okay. For economics, the results of the conclusions is the reasons for prices of iPhones. Okay. Aside from greed. Okay, but you're looking at through an economic lens why iPhones are as expensive as they are, what elements go into creating the pricing for those. Okay, then for theater arts, the results and conclusions, understanding of how chase scenes achieve their effects. Okay, so what you're doing is looking at how the cinematographer frames those chase scenes and how they shoot them, how they edit them. What kind of camera effects are used or whatever to create the effect that they want, whether it is excitement, whether it is something that's story-based, whether it's something altogether different that your auteur of a director really wants to get across. Okay? So, this is how you use those frameworks. Okay? Okay, so the next element here, making reasonable claims with available information. Okay, so your claims that you make based on your research need to have a logical basis in the actual research. You cannot make wide assertions without proof of these assertions. Okay, so just to be clear here, you cannot make wild accusations, assertions, anything like that unless you have some kind of evidence to back that up. Okay. So, for example, on page 136, okay, this is going to be dealing with essays about nutrition. Okay, this is an excerpt from a student essay. Right. According to one study, boys tend to associate their academic performance with skills and effort, while girls associate it with luck. My concern is with the implications of such research. Other studies suggest that American students attribute academic success to ability and intelligence, whereas in other nations such as Japan, students attribute academic success to effort. Therefore, either there was a paradigm shift in the effort by American boys and girls, or the data are false. This is my non sequitur face. This does not follow. Okay. Mainly because they've used an apples to oranges comparison of the studies. Okay, he's trying to compare a gendered study to a non-gendered study. That's never going to work. You need to have an apples to apples comparison. Okay, because he's dealing with, when he talks about the nationality stuff. Now he's not getting gendered. Now he's getting to its national identity as opposed to boys versus girls. Okay. The other thing is he has a black or white choice here, an either or fallacy, where he says there's either a paradigm shift in the effort by American boys and girls, or the data are false. Maybe there's a third option here, in that you're not reading the data right, and you're not making the correct comparisons. Okay. That's actually what's actually happening here. Okay, so he's not using reasonable claims here. What he's actually doing is trying to manufacture something that sounds smart, and it's actually just going to lose him points. All right, so you should only make claims with a strong basis in evidence for which you have clear proof. Okay, good example. This is on page 137. This is from an author named Gary Taubes, Excerpt from a book titled Good Calories, Bad Calories, Challenging the Conventional Wisdom on Diet, Weight Control, and Disease. Okay? This book uses enormous research projects to support their assertion that lacking fiber in your diet does not cause an increase in health risks. Okay? So this is entirely an argument about whether or not you need to eat that bran muffin in the morning. Okay? So take a listen. Over the past quarter century, there has been a steady accumulation of evidence refuting the notion that a fiber-deficient diet causes colon cancer, polyps, or diverticulitis, let alone any other diseases of civilization. The pattern is precisely what would be expected of a hypothesis that simply isn't true. The larger and more rigorous the trials are set up to test it, the more consistently negative the evidence. Between 1994 and 2000, 2 observational studies of 47,000 male health professionals and the 89,000 women of the Nurses' Health Study, both run out of Harvard School of Public Health, and a half dozen randomized control trials concluded that fiber consumption is unrelated to the risk of colon cancer, as is apparently the consumption of fruits and vegetables. The results of the 49,000 women dietary modification trial at Women's Health Initiative, published in 2006, confirmed that increasing the fiber in the diet by eating more whole grains, fruits, and vegetables had no beneficial effect on colon cancer, nor did it prevent heart disease or breast cancer or induce weight loss. Okay, so as you can see there, he's using 2 enormous, and literally enormous research projects. Most times with research projects, a large sample is usually considered to be about 1,000 participants. Okay, the last time I tried to do a research project where I had to get some participants involved with it, I was only able to get about 276. Okay, and that was doing through an internet message board. Okay, these studies that they're using, okay, if I'm doing my math right, which is doubtful because math is not my subject, this is going to be approximately it's 136,000 participants. Okay, plus another 49,000. So 136 plus 49,000. That's going to be 185,000 total participants in these studies. Okay, so that can be fairly assumed to be a good size sample, and definitely enough to reach that kind of a conclusion. Okay, so again, your available information has to support your claim, and it has to be reasonably able to support that claim. Okay, now we get to supporting claims. When you make a claim in an essay, you're going to need to support it with evidence to prove in a reasonable, logical manner that the claim is correct. Okay? Consider whether the support you offer for your claims are appropriate, that is to say they are good quality, and that they're adequate, of a good quantity. Okay? So appropriate amount of support claims are acceptable and relevant to the discipline. They rest on dependable, respectable sources and are consistent with your audience's expectations. Okay, so we're dealing with 2 out of the 3 elements of rhetoric. So we're talking about the 3 elements of rhetoric are ethos, which is credentials, pathos, which is emotion, and logos, which is logic. Okay, so in this case, for appropriate claims, we're dealing with 2 out of 3. We're dealing with ethos and logos. Okay, so they have to be relevant to the discipline, and they have to be from respectable sources and consistent with who the audience is expecting to talk on it. Okay, so that gets you to appropriate. To get to adequate, you need to have a sufficient amount in terms of type, that is types of studies and number of recognized experts, and the amount of support that's presented to your claim. The type and amount of support in turn is persuasive for the intended audience. So the amount of support that you have is going to serve to help influence your audience and make them say, hey, you know what? They got a point there. I think that they are being really logical here. I am willing to believe their claim. Okay, on page 141, there is an excerpt from a political science essay, okay, which is followed by a flowchart that gives you the appropriate and adequate support of that essay, okay. It has a good amount of support for its claims. So let's take a look at this excerpt, okay. So this excerpt is from an author named Richard Boyd. And the title of it is The Value of Civility. It was originally published in a journal called Urban Studies. All right, so here we go. Because we are all members of the same political community interacting on grounds of civic equality, we have an obligation to be polite in our everyday interactions with our fellow citizens. In the linguistic analogy developed by the philosopher Michael Oakeshott, civility is a kind of adverbial restraint on the civic language we speak with one another. In the same way that one is enjoined to speak politely, modestly, or temperately, the adverbial condition of civility modifies and qualifies conduct without specifying its content. We can communicate our wishes or injunctions to fellow citizens, whatever these wishes may be, so long as we agree to subscribe to common conditions on the means that we may legitimately use in the pursuit of those self-chosen ends. Membership is defined in terms of this common moral relationship, and it is this relationship that in turn gives rise to our responsibility to be civil to others. Okay, so this author is using, has his claim in the first sentence of the excerpt. Okay, his claim is that because we're all members of the same political community interacting on grounds of civic equality, we have an obligation to be polite in our everyday interactions with our fellow citizens. That's his claim. Okay, so let's see if we have appropriate support and adequate support. So the flowchart following the excerpt gives this for appropriate support. Okay, so based on acceptable and relevant to the academic discipline. Okay, that is a yes. Citing an established philosopher is acceptable in political science. Okay, is it dependable, accepted source? Okay, the philosopher that he quotes is Michael Oakeshott. Oakeshott is an influential scholar who is well known to political scientists. So yes, it is dependable, accepted source. The ethos works itself out. Is it consistent with audience expectations? Okay, well, let's assume here that who he's writing for is a political science leaning audience. Okay, readers of this journal, obviously we're talking an academic journal of political science, would expect references to established scholars. So yes, it is consistent with audience expectations. Now let's take a look at the adequate support flowchart. Okay, is it a sufficient type of support? Okay, reference to an established scholar is adequate for this rhetorical situation. Okay, so yes, it is a adequate type of support. Okay, let's talk about the amount of support. Okay, now you might be thinking, if you're outside of academic circles, he only quoted one guy. Why is that so influential? The thing is, though, is that that one guy is like the guy. Okay, generally citing a single well-established scholar would be sufficient for this claim. Okay, so yes, it is a sufficient adequate amount of support. Now, is it persuasive for the intended audience? The prominent scholar cited would likely be persuasive for readers of the journal. So yes. Okay, so we have hit all the dots here. Okay, we've touched every base in this particular claim. The Richard Boyd has succeeded in successfully supporting his claim. Now, here's an example that I want you guys to work with. Okay, we're going to have you guys pause this for about 10 minutes, and I want you guys to work through the flow chart with this excerpt. Okay, now we have an excerpt from a student essay that's on pages 142 and 143. This is about reasons for a community's economic struggles. Okay, so there are two primary claims that are made in the excerpt. Okay, here's what I want you to talk about on questions of the professor. Okay, discuss whether the evidence presented in the excerpt is appropriate to the claims being made. Now, again, to be appropriate, it has to be from acceptable and relevant to the academic discipline. has to be from dependable, accepted sources. It has to be consistent with audience expectations. Okay? Then you also have to discuss whether the evidence presented in the excerpt is adequate for the claims. That is, that there's enough present. Okay? So, in this case, is the type of support adequate? Is there enough of it there? Is the amount of support okay? And is it persuasive to the intended audience? Okay? So here is the excerpt. And then I'll let you guys pause it for 10 minutes and work on this. Starting on page 142. Okay? Just to give some background information, this essay is written for a general writing course. The student tries to make a claim about the reasons for certain communities' economic struggles. Let's see. If the intended audience is a general audience, for example, readers of a local newspaper. Okay, so here is her essay. Then again, there's two claims, so you have to look for both claims. One could argue that because of the low educational achievement in this community, the socioeconomic status is relatively low. 32% of the adults in the area did not complete secondary education. 23% of the population in this district are below poverty level, and 35.7% make it under $25,000. The per capita income is $15,272 according to the U.S. Census Bureau. However, other factors cause this village to struggle economically. First, there are not many high-paying job opportunities. This area's industry consists primarily of manufacturing, 17.2%, education, health, and social services, 19.9%, and recreation and accommodation, 16.6%. There are 4 main institutions that provide jobs for this community: the Big Mountain Resort, a state prison, the school district, and a regional hospital. A small percentage of the population, 3.6%, owns private businesses. Okay, so again, she is arguing about the reasons for communities' economic struggles. Okay, I want you to take 10 minutes and decide if you have appropriate support here for that claim, for her 2 claims, and adequate support for those claims. Okay, we'll go ahead and pause the lecture for 10 minutes and submit your answers to the thread on questions to the professor. So by now hopefully you have posted your verdict on how well this particular student has supported their claims. Okay. First off, let's get to the actual claims themselves. The first claim. Because of the low educational achievement in this community, the socioeconomic status is relatively low. Okay. The second claim is there are not many high-paying job opportunities in the community. Okay, so here is Yagelski's verdict on this as far as appropriate support goes. Is it acceptable and relevant to the academic discipline? Okay, it seems acceptable for the rhetorical situation. However, it is not acceptable for the claim. Okay, particularly that claim about low educational achievement. Okay, she only mentions that once. Okay, the only time she mentions that is at the very beginning. 32% of the adults in this area did not complete secondary education. Okay, that's all she says about it. The rest of it is all about economics. So that's all. The rest of the evidence she presents is all about economics. So that is not acceptable for the claim. Next, dependable accepted sources. The one source that she cites in this passage is the Census Bureau, which does count as a dependable source. Okay. And third, is it consistent with audience expectations? In Yagelski's opinion, the audience likely wants more relevant information for the claim. Okay, so in this case, it is not appropriate support. Okay, let's see if it is adequate. Okay, let's look at the type of support. Is it the right type of support to support this claim? Okay, while statistics are appropriate for use in supporting a claim, Yagelski's verdict is that the specific information presented here is inadequate, and that's specifically because it's not citing anything education related. It's all economics. Okay. The amount of support. Is there enough support here quantity-wise to help this claim? The problem here, there's too little support that is directly relevant to the claim provided. Again, the only time she mentions education is in that second sentence. The rest of it is all economic data. It has absolutely nothing to do with education. Okay? Third, is it persuasive for the intended audience? Now, it is likely persuasive for a general audience. However, readers may not find the data sufficient, okay, which is going to call your credibility into question. So as a result, this excerpt does not have appropriate nor adequate support. This writer needs to go back to the drawing board and probably focus more on that education question rather than citing off every Census Bureau statistic they can find about economic performance. All right, so let's take a look at the features of analytical writing. Okay. So there are four major features of analytical writing. First off, there's a relevant topic that is worthy of analysis. The topic is a good fit for the academic field to study. It addresses a relevant question in the field that's interesting to the writer and relevant to the readers. Now, this is why I've been trying to steer people away from scholarship essay topics where they're asking you to talk about yourself. Okay? That's not really a good, relevant topic that's good for analysis, because you're not going to want to try to analyze yourself. You're going to want to try to sell yourself. And that's an entirely different kettle of fish there. Okay? So for the most part, you want your topic to be something that is a good academic fit. Okay? It has a relevant question in the field. What kind of analysis of this can actually help in advancing thought about the topic? Okay? It should be interesting to the writer. It shouldn't be something that's going to bore you. It should also be relevant to the readers. Okay? Whoever your intended audience is, it needs to be something that they can resonate with. Now, complexity. The exploration of the topic goes into as much detail as possible to best understand the subject. There should be a measure of objectivity and skepticism to make sure explanations are not oversimplified. Okay? So, you may recall last week we talked about Chloe Charles. In her essay, she had a lot of oversimplified historical data. Okay? Especially when it came to the demographics of college students prior to 1965. Okay? You need to have a measure of objectivity and skepticism to whatever research you're doing, whatever information you find. Okay? Your explanations should not be oversimplified. They need to take everything into account. You need to have sufficient and appropriate evidence and support. Sufficient evidence depends on the topic, rhetorical situation, and the depth of analysis. Okay? Is it going to be, are you going into deep enough of an analysis, and is your evidence going to support that much of it, that deep of an analysis? Okay? Is the rhetorical situation calling for that deep of analysis? Is your audience going to have the patience for that deep of analysis? Appropriate evidence depends on subject, expectations of the audience, purpose of analysis, and field of study. Okay? So you need to have all these elements in play when you're doing analytical writing. And then fourth, reasonable conclusions. Your conclusions, your claim for your thesis, and all other claims must be interpreted from the evidence in the most logical manner possible. Your thesis should never be treated as indisputable fact. All thesis statements leave openings for discussion and debate. And I think this is an important one that we have to point out here. Your thesis statement should not be an absolute fact, okay? Nor should you treat it as an absolute fact, okay? All thesis statements, all good thesis statements, are ones that are open to interpretation and debate, okay? So, however, your conclusions that you reach need to be reasonably interpreted from the evidence in the most logical manner possible. A should follow B, should follow C, okay? We don't want another situation where you have, like the last student is doing, where I think that education is why this community is struggling, but let me give you all these economic statistics. Or like the student who is saying, boys and girls attribute their success differently. However, this other study says that Americans attribute their success differently than Japanese do. So therefore, there must be some falsified data here. Okay? That's a non sequitur argument there. Okay? All right, with that in mind, this week is also the workshop week. The first workshop is the revision workshop. Okay. Now, as I mentioned in the Collaborate discussion last week, workshops are going to last the full week. I can't do a specific day with an online class. So you're going to have the entire week to workshop your essays. Okay. Now, the way it's going to work is you need to upload a rough draft to your team's discussion thread on the discussion board. Okay? Let me repeat that because the 1302 students seem to be having trouble with this. You're uploading a rough draft to your team's discussion thread. That means you have to submit it, you have to upload it as part of a reply to the thread. Okay? You will be sharing it with your team and getting feedback from your teammates. Okay? So, you're going to post that essay to the discussion board. You can attach it, okay? Make sure that when you attach it, it's in one of those acceptable file formats. I might also note that you cannot attach anything from either Google Docs, or you cannot attach anything from a cloud file system, okay? People have been trying the cloud file system techniques and it's not working, okay? So make sure that you are actually attaching a file that is physically on your computer when you do this, okay? Now, once you have your draft up there, it's up to you to keep coming back to the discussion board to find other drafts to give feedback to. Every member of the team must post revision feedback on every essay. Now remember, your teammates are depending on you, and this is not a competition. You guys are all trying to help each other make the best essays possible. One pro tip I can give you for this is to post your feedback as a direct reply to your teammate's essay. Okay? Upload the essay as a reply to the thread, then reply to the upload to give feedback. Okay? The system does allow you to do tiered replies like that. Okay? So when you see a draft, click on the file, read the draft, and then reply to the thread that the draft was posted to with your feedback. Okay? Now, this means that I do not want teams establishing their own threads for this workshop. Okay? Use the threads that I've already set up for you, or the ones that you guys set up yourselves. Okay? Do not make a new thread just for this. Okay? Otherwise, that discussion board is going to get to be a mess in a big hurry. Okay? As it is, one of my 1302s, the team discussion forum currently has 42 discussion threads. There's not that many teams. Okay? So, again, you must post a draft to your team's discussion board on eCampus. You must check the discussion board on eCampus to find the draft and offer feedback. Everyone has to be giving feedback. Everyone has to be posting drafts. Now, this week is going to be a revision workshop. So your feedback should be focusing on the content of the essay, not the proofreading or grammar elements. Do not correct any spelling. Do not correct any punctuation. This is what I want you to focus on. 1, organization. Is the essay well organized? Is it read logically? Does it read in a way that is comfortable for you? Okay, that gets us to the second one, readability. How comfortable is it for you to read? Is it something where you have a lot of terminology that they're having to define, or they haven't defined, or you're having to try to figure out? Is there awkward wordings? Is there paragraph breaks? Okay, paragraph breaks are part of readability. We do not want you, and this inevitably happens at least 11 to 35 times a semester. I do not want people turning in essays that are 5-page single paragraphs. Okay, that gets to be horrifyingly bad to read. Okay, so part of readability is, are they using appropriate paragraph breaks? Okay. Then we got focus. Are they staying on topic? Or do they have a strict focus on what they're trying to say, on the point that they're trying to make, or are they wandering all over the place? Okay. Now, the addition to that, for this particular essay, we're looking for whether the subject is well analyzed. If it's clear how they're analyzing, what kind of framework they're using, okay, how much of a breakdown they're giving of that analysis, whether their claims are supported sufficiently, is there enough evidence presented, okay, and is there a clear thesis statement? Can you tell exactly what point they're trying to make, okay, and does the analysis support that point? All right, and that does it for this week. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of what I'm expecting in terms of these analysis essays. Okay, let's make sure that we are doing this assignment. We are getting these drafts posted to eCampus, and you're maintaining and keeping up with everything that you need to be keeping up with, which includes MindTap, which includes the weekly discussion boards, in addition to this particular essay. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave it here for this week. Next week, we're going to do some little tips and tricks that will help you better write a more focused and better readable analysis essay. Okay, so until next week, I will leave it to you guys to work on your workshops, and I will see you guys next week.